Arizona. A dry wind carries with it sand that sweeps along the streets of the small town of Red Ridge. The sun beats down mercilessly, as if it wants to burn out everything alive from this land. The road along the town is deserted. Only a few rare wagons slowly make their way along it, their wheels creaking. By noon, a rider approached the outskirts of the town. His name was Ethan Caldwell, a man of 37, tall, with broad shoulders and the weary face of a person who has seen too much. He had returned here for the first time in many years after his father's death. He inherited an old estate, a hunting lodge in the mountains, where his family once spent winters. Now Ethan didn't know whether to be happy or to curse this gift. He was a cowboy, a hired gun, accustomed to dusty roads, not to four walls. But the law is the law. The family property was passed down to him. He passed the town center, where music rattled and laughter could be heard near the saloon, and headed for the mountain trail. There, around the bend, the path to his new home began. The journey took several hours. By evening, the sun had softened, and the shadows of the pines lay in long streaks on the ground. Soon Ethan saw the old building, the family hunting lodge, darkened by time, but still sturdy. The wooden walls held the smell of resin and smoke. The roof had sagged slightly, but overall the house stood firmly, as if it had been waiting for him. Ethan dismounted, tied his horse at the well, and, removing his hat, pushed open the creaking door. It was dark inside, smelling of dampness and the past. Old furniture was covered in dust. Chests lined the walls, a rusty wrought iron lock on a box near the stove. He hung his hat on a nail and stepped inside. But suddenly, "Now you're mine," a woman's voice rang out, strong and commanding. Ethan turned sharply. In the back of the room, lit by a beam of light from the half-open window, stood a girl, young but with a wild look in her eyes. Her long dark hair fell over her shoulders. She wore a simple fringed suede dress, cinched with a belt. In one hand, she held a hunting knife, and the fingers of her other hand pointed directly at him. "Who the hell are you?" Ethan scowled, instinctively reaching for his holster. "Don't move," she growled. "This house is my sanctuary. You have no right to be here." Ethan smirked. "Sanctuary? Girl, this house belongs to the Caldwell family, and now it's mine. I am Henry Caldwell's son." Her eyes widened. She took a step forward. "You're lying. Henry died many years ago. He had no heirs." "You're mistaken," Ethan replied coldly. "I am his son, and now I'm the owner of this place." For a moment, silence hung between them. The wind howled outside, and the air inside was taut, like a string. "If that's true," her voice became softer but tougher, "then know this. I'm not leaving. This house saved my life. I've lived here all this time, and now it's my sanctuary." She lifted her chin as if issuing a challenge. Ethan stepped closer. In the light from the door, her face became clearer. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes like fire in the dark night. There was something untamed, wild, and alien to a peaceful life in her gaze. "Do you have a name?" he asked, trying to ease the tension. "Cassie," she answered shortly. "And remember, cowboy, try to drive me out, and you'll regret it." She raised the knife even higher. The situation could have ended in bloodshed, but Ethan was too experienced to let his emotions take over. He slowly took his hand off the holster and raised his palm. "Calm down. I'm not your enemy, Cassie, but I won't let you dictate terms in a house that belongs to me. You don't understand." There was a mix of fury and fear in her voice. "This house hides more than you think. You can't just walk in here and declare yourself the owner." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "What exactly do you mean?" She fell silent. Only her breathing quickened, but her eyes remained firm. "Time will tell," she threw back. "But for now, know one thing. You are my guest now, and you won't be able to leave here of your own free will." These words sounded like a sentence. Ethan felt anger boiling up inside him. His own house, and some girl was dictating the rules to him. But he held back. Instead, he took a step toward the table, blew the dust off the surface, and sat down, keeping his gaze fixed on her. "Fine," he said hoarsely. "We'll see whose will is stronger." The evening quickly colored the sky with scarlet tones. Ethan started a fire in the stove. The house came alive with the crackling of logs. Cassie didn't let go of her knife, watching his every move. The atmosphere was like a siege. He ate cold meat from his bag. She ate dry crusts of bread she found in a corner. They sat opposite each other, like enemies at the same table. "So you've lived here all this time?" Ethan broke the silence. "Yes, since I lost everything. Family, home, land, everything." A hint of pain flickered in her voice, but her gaze remained hard. "And I won't let anyone take the last thing away from me." Ethan sighed. "The world is unjust, but I didn't ask to come back here. This inheritance fell on me like a stone." She slammed the knife into the tabletop. "Then refuse it." Ethan stood up. His eyes flashed. "No one is going to tell me what to do, especially a girl hiding in someone else's house." They both stood, looking at each other. The silence was so thick that only the crackling of the fire could be heard. Finally, Cassie lowered her eyes, pulled out the knife, and moved to the wall. But her words were firm. "Then stay. But know this, you are mine now." These words echoed in his chest. Not a threat, not a plea, but a law that could not be challenged. Ethan sat down again. Anger seethed within him, but with it came a strange spark, something that resembled curiosity. Night fell on the old house, and their confrontation had only just begun. Night took full control of the mountains. Outside the hunting lodge windows, the wind howled, lashed the pine branches, and whistled through cracks in the roof. The fire in the stove blazed brighter, casting red reflections on the walls. Ethan sat at the table, thoughtfully tracing his finger over the wooden surface, scarred with knife marks. Cassie settled by the wall, the knife still in her hand. It seemed she wouldn't part with the blade even in her sleep. The silence was stretched like a rope between two cliffs. "So you're planning to sleep holding that piece of metal?" Ethan asked hoarsely. "If I have to," she retorted. "I've lived alone for too long to trust the first person I meet." He smirked. "I'm not the first person you met, it seems. I'm the owner of this house." Her eyes flashed. "Owner?" She jumped to her feet. "The owners of my life burned down my home. The same ones who called themselves owners of land and people. You don't understand." "Then explain," he interrupted sharply. "I'm used to listening to facts, not rumors." She froze, breathing heavily, as if fighting with herself. Then she slowly lowered the knife and spoke. "My family lived south of here, closer to the border. We had a ranch, small but our own, until the Claytons came for the land. They offered my father pennies to sell, but he refused. One night our house went up in flames like a torch. My father and mother burned inside. I only survived because I was in the barn." Ethan scowled. He had heard the name of the Claytons more than once. A family of wealthy cattle ranchers who had long kept the area in fear. "And you went into the mountains?" he clarified. "Yes, and I found this house. No one was looking for me here. This is where I learned to survive." She clenched her fists. "I was waiting for the moment when I could get my revenge." Ethan slowly stood up. His shadow trembled on the wall. "So you decided to turn my house into a fortress for your war? And what if I did?" Cassie snapped, throwing her head back. "What will you do? Drive me out?" Ethan stepped closer. Now they were almost face to face. Her breath was hot. Her eyes burned with a stubborn light. "I never drive out those who know how to hold a knife," he said quietly but firmly. "But know this, this house is no place for hiding. If you've decided to fight the Claytons, you're not alone anymore." She recoiled, as if she couldn't believe her ears. You want to help me?" He smirked at the corner of his lips. "I want to help myself. The Claytons once tried to take my father's land too. It seems to have become a habit of theirs. It looks like we have a common enemy." Cassie lowered the knife. For a moment, her gaze showed not fury, but something else, relief. But then she quickly put her stubborn mask back on. "Don't think I trust you, cowboy." "I'm not counting on it," he nodded. "Trust is a rare thing, but an alliance is different." By morning, the house was alive with sounds. Ethan mended the roof, carried logs, and cleaned the well. Cassie rode in the forest, checking her snares and bringing back game. They worked in silence, but every glance, whether accidental or intentional, said more than words. In the evening, when the campfire behind the house was burning brightly, Ethan took a flask and held it out to Cassie. "Whiskey. It warms you better than your animosity." She smiled for the first time. There was something wild but beautiful in her smile. She took a sip and, returning the flask, asked, "Why are you still here? You could have left, sold the house, and forgotten about it." "Because I'm tired of running," he answered simply. "All my life I've been running from problems. But here it's time to put an end to it." She looked at him for a long time, as if trying to read his soul. Then she said quietly, "Maybe we really can do this." But the peace didn't last long. On the third day, a rider appeared below, at the foot of the mountain. Ethan noticed him from the window. The stranger stopped at the road, looked around, and rode back. "A scout," Ethan said grimly. "The Claytons already know the house isn't empty." Cassie turned pale. "They'll come, and they'll come soon." Ethan took out his revolver, checked the cylinder, and nodded. "Let them come. This time, they'll be ready for them here." Night fell again. The wind died down, but there was a sense of dread in the house. Cassie sat by the stove, sorting through bullets. Ethan sharpened his knife. Their alliance was forged by danger. Suddenly she looked up and said quietly, "Ethan, if we die tomorrow, know this, I'm grateful to you for not driving me away." He looked at her with a long gaze. "And I'm grateful to you, Cassie, for reminding me that even in this world, there are those who don't break." She looked away, but her fingers trembled. The distant sound of hooves broke their silence. The night brought with it the approach of war. The wine from the mountain was dying down, but the silence was not peaceful, it was a harbinger of trouble. The lodge stood in the darkness, as if preparing for a fight itself. Inside, it smelled of iron, gunpowder, and smoke from the stove. Cassie sat by the window, a rifle in her hands. Her eyes watched the road below without blinking. Ethan, his jaw clenched, checked his bullets, arranging them in boxes. His every gesture was precise and confident, as if he had done this 1,000 times. "They'll come today," Cassie said, not taking her eyes off the road. "I know," Ethan replied. "The only question is how many of them there will be." The first things to appear were the lights of torches, small dots on the road, slowly climbing towards the house. With every minute, they grew brighter, closer, and more menacing. Cassie gripped her rifle tightly. "Too many. Count them," Ethan said dryly. They peered into the darkness. Shadows moved. Horses stomped their hooves on the stones. The men's voices sounded muffled. 1, 2, 5, 7, 10. Cassie whispered, as if counting her heartbeats. 12. "So, half of their gang," Ethan said. "The rest will show up if we don't finish this quickly." He went to the wall, adjusted the shutters so that only a narrow slit remained. "Only shoot for certain. We can't waste bullets." She nodded. There was no fear on her face, only cold determination. A rider stopped at the base of the house. His voice echoed through the night. "Hey, stranger, we know you're in there. The Claytons told me to tell you you have two choices. Come out and die quickly, or stay and burn alive in your hovel." In response, silence. Only the wind creaked in the logs. Cassie looked at Ethan. "What are we going to do?" He took his revolver, checked the cylinder. "Let them have the first shot. Let them think we're cowards." A laugh rang out from outside. Torches flew toward the walls. One of the Claytons' men swung back, throwing fire at the roof. At that moment, a shot rang out. Cassie pulled the trigger. Her bullet hit the bandit's hand directly. The torch flew out, falling into the mud. The man howled, clutching his shoulder. A second flash. This was Ethan. His revolver hit short and hard. One of the attackers fell, toppling from his horse. The crowd screamed. Cries rang out. "They're inside. Burn the house." And the war began. Cassie shot, moving from window to window. Her face became like stone, her movements fast and sharp. She aimed like a hunter, accustomed to killing with one shot. Ethan moved differently with cold composure, as if every moment was under his control. He shot rarely, but each shot was deadly. Smoke hung in the room. The windows rattled from the volleys. Outside, horses whinnied, men shouted. The ground was lit up by the torch flames. One of the bandits ran up to the wall, swinging to break the window with his rifle butt. But the door burst open with a crash. Ethan rushed outside. A knife flashed in his hands. He struck quickly and accurately. The man fell without even a cry. Ethan grabbed a torch and threw it back into the crowd. The fire scattered with sparks. The horses shied, causing screams and chaos. Cassie covered him from inside. Her shot took down a second bandit who was trying to sneak up from behind. Back in the house, she screamed. Ethan dived back inside, locking the door. His shoulders rose and fell with tension. They'll overwhelm us with numbers. We have to last until dawn. But the gang was not going to retreat. They surrounded the house. Shots rang out from all sides. Bullets pierced the boards, ricocheted off the stone. Cassie shrieked. A piece of wood splintered near her shoulder. Damn, we won't have enough bullets for the whole night. Ethan looked around. His gaze stopped at the barn, standing a little further away. There are old barrels of kerosene there. If we set them on fire, we can cut off half their path to the house. Cassie shook her head. You won't make it. They'll shoot you dead on the spot. He smirked. Do you have a better plan? She gritted her teeth, then stood up sharply. I'll distract them. You get to the barn. No, he cut her off. It's too dangerous. We're both in the same danger, Cassie said firmly. If you want to live, trust me. She broke open the shutters and ran outside, shooting into the air, yelling as if they were a whole army. The crowd roared, and the riders rushed after her. At that moment, Ethan ran towards the barn. Bullets whistled over his head, but he made it. He grabbed a torch and lit the barrels. The fire shot upwards. The flames lit up the whole clearing. The horses reared up. The bandits screamed, shielding their faces with their hands. Cassie managed to get back to the house. Her face was smudged with soot. Her eyes glowed with fury. Well, she asked, breathing heavily. Ethan looked at the burning barn. Now they can't get any closer. But tomorrow a new wave will come. She nodded. So we only have one night to decide. Do we run, or do we face them again? Outside, curses and shouts rang out. The fire raged. The night thundered with gunshots. But inside the house, amidst the smoke and soot, they stood side by side to people bound by war. And at that moment, each one knew there was no turning back. The fire from the barn blazed until dawn. Smoke billowed through the gorge, the smell of burning stretching far down to the river. The Clayton's men eventually retreated. Some threw down their weapons, some withdrew, some led their horses away, shouting curses. But Ethan and Cassie knew this was only the first skirmish. By morning, the house was in a state of deathly order. Spent casings lay on the floor. The boards were riddled with bullets. The window glass was shattered. Ethan sat by the stove, cleaning his revolver, and Cassie patched up her torn boots. Her face was tired, but her eyes still burned. Did you see how they looked at us at the end? She asked. I did. Ethan nodded. But don't be happy. They went for the brothers. She looked up. The Claytons themselves. Yes. Ethan poked a ramrod into the cylinder, cleaning out the powder. These jackals will never admit defeat. Tomorrow or the day after, the owners will come here. By noon, their premonitions were confirmed. From the road that led to the town, the neighing of horses and the heavy clatter of hooves could be heard. A veil of dust rose into the air, and the procession appeared at the foot of the mountain. To road at the front, Derek Clayton, tall, broad-shouldered, with a beard, his dark eyes looking hard and cold. Next to him, his younger brother Earl, lean, with a perpetual smirk on his lips. Behind them, a dozen armed men. There they are, Cassie said, gripping her rifle. Ethan stood at the window. These aren't just bandits anymore. These are the owners. They stopped at the base of the slope. Derek raised his hand, and the whole gang came to a halt. His voice was low and resonant, as if the wind itself had carried it to the house. Hayes, I know you're in there. I'll give you one chance. Bring the girl out and come out yourself. We'll talk. In response, silence. Earl smirked. Hear that? He's scared. Derek scowled. No, this guy isn't scared. He's thinking. He spat and bellowed, "Fine, you have an hour, then I'm coming up myself." A heavy silence descended on the house. Cassie paced back and forth, like a caged animal. "We won't last against them. There are too many," she whispered. "And this is just the beginning." Ethan looked up. "I'm not going to retreat." She stopped, her eyes flashing. "This is madness. They'll crush us. They already crushed you, Cassie," he said calmly. "You've lived in fear in this house, hiding from them. I'm not going to repeat your fate." She froze. A lump was stuck in her throat. He had said what she was afraid to admit. All these years she had lived hiding, not fighting. "But what if we die?" she asked quietly. Ethan stepped closer. His face was grim, but there was a fire in his eyes. "It's better to die standing than to live on your knees." The hour flew by quickly. The hooves sounded again, and soon the doors of the house rattled from a blow. "Time's up," Derek roared. "Open up, Hayes." The answer was a shot. Ethan's bullet pierced the board next to one of the bandits' heads. They recoiled, shielding themselves, and everything started again. The firefight was more ferocious than the night before. Bullets fell like rain, glass shattered, and logs cracked. Cassie shot from the window, her rifle sounding hollow and powerful. Her shot took down one of the men, who fell into the dust. "Left," she screamed. Ethan rushed out the side window, opening fire with his revolver. His movements were fast and precise. He aimed at their legs, at their shoulders, but always to take the enemy out of the fight. But Derek and Earl were not simple leaders. They not only commanded, they moved forward themselves. Earl had his horse circle around, shooting from a carbine. Derek covered him, his voice overpowering the noise of the battle. "Get the door, set the roof on fire." And again, the smell of smoke. One of the bandits ran up with a torch and threw it at the thatched part of the roof. The fire shot up in a tongue of flame. "Damn it," Cassie screamed. "Ethan, the roof." He tore off a bucket and ran to the well. But bullets hit nearby, sparks flying from the stone. Cassie covered him, shooting blindly. But there were too many enemies. The fire grew. At that moment, Ethan noticed two more men scrambling up the steep slope behind the house. If they broke through, it was all over. He rushed to the stairs, broke out the window, and jumped down. The ground hit his feet, but he got up and fired. The first opponent fell. The second rushed at him with a knife. The fight was short and brutal. Steel flashed. Blows echoed dully in the night. Ethan grabbed the enemy's arm, twisted it, and plunged his knife into his chest. But while he was fighting, the house was burning more intensely. Cassie ran out. Her hair was sooty, her eyes furious. She was carrying a bucket, pouring water on the fire. The smoke was suffocating, but she didn't give up. "We won't let them burn it down." She coughed, screaming. Ethan ran up, shot towards Earl. He recoiled, almost falling from his horse, but he survived. "Get inside," Ethan shouted. "A little more and the walls will collapse." They ran back in, slamming the door. Smoke was already clinging to the ceiling. The beams were creaking. "What are we going to do?" Cassie coughed, but held her rifle. Ethan looked at her, then at the revolver. "We'll hold out until night, and then we'll leave through the forest. They'll pin us down here." She nodded, but her eyes were burning not with agreement, but with fury. "No, Ethan, I'm not leaving. This house is my fortress. This is the place I chose myself. And if the Claytons want to take it, they'll have to pay in blood." Outside, Derek's roar could be heard. "Light it again. Don't spare the powder. Today this house will be their grave." Cassie raised her rifle. Her voice rang out through the noise. "Let them try." And at that moment, in the flames and smoke, Ethan understood. She wasn't just a girl who escaped a fire. She was a warrior. And now they stood together. Night swallowed the mountains again. The battle was not over, but Ethan and Cassie no longer had a way back. They were defending not for the house, but for their freedom. The house creaked like a living thing dying in torment. The beams groaned, the roof crumbled with hot ash, and smoke billowed outside. It seemed the building itself was groaning, resisting the fire. Cassie, coughing, slid the shutters closed to hold back the smoke a little. Her hair was tangled, Her face was covered in soot, but her eyes burned just as they had the night before. "We can't hold out here any longer," she shouted, choking. "I know," Ethan replied, tossing the last bullets into the cylinder. "But if we go out now, they'll just shoot us down like rats." Outside, horses whinnied and voices were heard. Derek Clayton again shouted commands. "Torch the back wall. Let it burn to the ground. No mercy." The crowd roared in response, like beasts that had scented blood. Ethan rushed to the window and fired. One of the bandits fell, his torch rolling on the ground. The second managed to jump back, but immediately received a shotgun blast from Cassie. "Count your bullets," he yelled at her. She looked at the rifle, her fingers trembling. 3 left. Ethan checked his revolver. "I have 6. They exchanged glances. There was no fear in their eyes, only an understanding. It wouldn't be enough for all the enemies. The fire spread across the ceiling. Boards cracked. Sparks flew. Suddenly, with a terrible crash, part of a beam collapsed right in the center of the room. Cassie shrieked. She was thrown back. Ethan rushed to her, grabbed her hands and dragged her to the wall. "Are you alive?" "Yes," she nodded, breathing heavily. "But a little more and we'll burn alive." He stood up and looked around. There was no way out. Behind them, the house was engulfed in flames in front of the Clayton's men. "We have to break through," he said. "How?" Her voice trembled. Ethan looked at the window. Through them, outside, Derek's voice was heard again. "Hayes, last chance. Come out and you'll die quickly." The answer was a shot. Ethan's bullet knocked the torch right out of one of the bandits' hands. The crowd roared. Cassie came up to him, her fingers trembling, but her voice was firm. "If we go out, we go out together." He nodded. Together, they threw open the door and rushed outside. The air burned their lungs, but it was cleaner than the smoke inside. The sun was setting behind the mountains, coloring the sky a bloody red. The crowd stirred. The Claytons stood at the front, on their horses. Earl smirked. "So the rats have come out." Derek raised his hand. "Don't shoot. I'll go first." He dismounted, slowly walking forward. His steps were heavy, his eyes fixed directly on Ethan. "You took my men, stranger. You challenged our family." His voice was hollow and husky. "Now I'll take your life." Ethan stepped forward, a revolver in his hand. "Try it." At that moment, the crowd parted, forming a circle. The air was filled with tension. Everyone understood. A duel was about to begin. Cassie wanted to step towards Ethan, but he held up his hand. "Don't interfere." She clenched her rifle but obeyed. There was fury in her eyes, but also respect. He chose to fight fairly. Derek took out his pistol. His movements were slow and confident. He smiled as if he knew victory was already in his pocket. "On the count of 3, he said. 1, 2. But he wasn't the one who started shooting. Ethan fired first. The bullet hit Derek in the shoulder. He howled and recoiled. But then, through the pain, he shot back. The bullet grazed Ethan's sleeve, just missing his arm. The crowd buzzed. Earl screamed, "Kill him, brother." And the fight raged. They shot again and again, walking towards each other, as if death itself was pushing them closer. Ethan fired. The bullet sliced through the air, barely missing Derek. He returned fire, and Ethan fell to his knee. The bullet had grazed his thigh, burning it. Cassie screamed, but she held herself back. Her fingers were white on the rifle stock. The last shot decided everything. Ethan's bullet went straight into Derek's chest. He stared, took a step forward, and collapsed to the ground, dropping his pistol. Silence hung over the clearing. Earl jumped from his horse and rushed to his brother. His face was contorted with malice. You killed him." Ethan raised his revolver, aiming directly at Earl. "You're next." The crowd froze. The Claytons' men looked at their leaders and for the first time, fear flickered in their eyes. Earl slowly raised his hands. His smirk was gone. "Wait, we can make a deal." Cassie stepped forward, her voice sounding like a whip crack. "You should have made a deal earlier, when you were chasing women through the streets and burning down houses." She raised her rifle, aiming it at Earl. "Now all you can do is run." The crowd murmured. The riders exchanged glances. Without Derek, they were lost. One by one, they began to retreat, leading their horses away, abandoning their weapons. Earl remained standing, trembling, his eyes darting between his dead brother and the barrels aimed at him. "Get out," Ethan said coldly, "and don't come back." Earl backed away, then jumped on his horse and, shouting a curse, rode away. Only the smoking house, the dead Derek, and the two, a man and a woman who had stood their ground, remained in the clearing. Cassie lowered her rifle. Her shoulders were trembling, but her eyes burned with fire. She looked at Ethan and whispered, "We did it." He put his revolver back in the holster and put his arm around her shoulders. "This is just the beginning." The sun set behind the mountains, and night again covered Red River. But now the town knew. In its valley, there was a force capable of challenging even the Claytons, and Cassie, for the first time in many years, felt free. The silence after the battle was deceptive. The wind swept through the streets of Red River, blowing the smell of fire out of the cracks. Cassie's burned-down house was still smoldering, leaving only a black husk. People looked at the ashes and at the man and woman standing next to them. The old fear was no longer in their eyes. "The Claytons aren't all-powerful," someone in the crowd whispered. Another added, "If one stranger could defeat them, then there is hope." Cassie stood next to Ethan, her hand involuntarily resting on his elbow. He didn't pull away. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now." Ethan looked at the charred beams. "Now they'll gather more men and return." Anxiety flashed in her eyes. "Do you think Earl will give up?" "No. He's more malicious than his brother, and more cunning." Derek attacked head-on, but Earl will look for a weakness. The night brought peace only to the town, but not to them. Cassie couldn't sleep, listening to Ethan's steps outside the window. He paced back and forth, like a wolf guarding its pack. There was something indomitable in his silhouette, outlined by the moonlight. She went out to him, throwing an old shawl over her shoulders. "You're not sleeping at all." "I can't," he shrugged. "In places like this, silence is always a harbinger of trouble." She moved closer, trying to catch the expression on his face. "You could have left after the duel, but you stayed. Why?" Ethan fell silent. Pain, old and unresolved, flashed in his eyes. He looked away. "Because I know what it means to lose a home. I once had my own, and I didn't protect it." Cassie carefully touched his hand. "Then maybe now you have a chance to make things right." Ethan looked at her. Their gazes met, and in that moment, there was no longer a burnt ruin or fear, just a people fate had brought together in the darkest part of their lives. At dawn, a messenger rode into town. His horse was in a lather. His face was dusty. He stopped right in the square. "Listen up," he shouted. "Word in the county that the marshals are heading this way." The crowd became animated. Some crossed themselves. Some smiled for the first time in many months. But there were also those who scowled. Among the residents, there were plenty who profited from the Claytons' business. Ethan tensed. "Marshals, huh, that's good, but we still have to survive until they get here." Cassie nodded. Earl won't wait. And she was right. That same evening, a rumble of hooves approached Red River. Women hurried to get their children indoors. Men came out onto the street, old rifles in hand. Earl Clayton had returned. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him were 24 armed men. Their faces were grim and cold. They were organized, like a military squad. Earl stopped his horse at the town's entrance. His eyes gleamed. "I've come for what belongs to me, for power over this place, and the one who dared to challenge me, I'll trample him." The crowd recoiled. Only Ethan and Cassie remained standing in the street, directly opposite him. "Your power ended with your brother," Ethan said. "No, stranger." Earl smirked. "His death is a reason for war." He raised his hand. His men moved forward, but didn't shoot. There was a cold determination in their movements. They had come not just to kill, but to destroy all resistance. "They're not afraid of the crowd anymore," Cassie whispered. "They came to kill." "All the better." Ethan checked his revolver. "It means they won't hide." At that moment, the town's men appeared from behind the houses. Old men, farmers, the blacksmith, even teenagers, each holding a weapon. No one said a word, but their gazes clearly stated they would stand by his side. Earl froze. His eyes darted between the residents and Ethan. "You think this will save you? I'll bring even more men. I'll burn this town to the ground." Ethan stepped forward. "Try it. Just know this. Now you're not fighting one man. You're fighting all of us." The crowd murmured, raising their weapons. Earl clenched his teeth. His plan to intimidate the town had failed. He yanked the reins, and his riders began to retreat, but slowly, their eyes still on Ethan. "This isn't the end," he snarled. "I'll be back, and the marshals won't be able to help you then." He turned his horse around and rode away, leaving clouds of dust behind him. The town sighed in relief. People began to talk, feeling like a unified community for the first time. Cassie looked at Ethan. "You did it," she said. "No," he shook his head. "You all did. I just showed them that the Claytons aren't immortal." She smiled through her exhaustion. "And yet, without you, they would have broken us." Ethan fell silent. His gaze was directed towards the horizon, where Earl's riders had vanished. He knew another battle lay ahead, the last and most dangerous one. That night, Cassie sat by the campfire next to him. "Do you think the marshals will make it in time?" she asked. "I hope so," he replied, "but I won't rely on hope alone." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then I'll be by your side, always." Ethan covered her hand with his. "Together," he said softly, "no matter how hard it gets." The fire crackled in the darkness, owls hooted, but somewhere in the distance, on the edge of the valley, a new darkness was already gathering. Earl Clayton hadn't left for good. He had only just begun his hunt. The wind blew dust through the streets of Red River. It seemed as if nature itself was holding its breath. The people lived in anticipation of a storm, knowing that Earl Clayton would not forgive his defeat. Every day, every night a tense wait. "They'll come," Ethan said at a meeting in the tavern, "and they won't come as 4 or 10. Earl will gather everyone he can buy or intimidate." The assembled men exchanged glances. The blacksmith Raymond's hands were trembling. Old Joseph gripped his rifle, as if afraid it would be taken from him. But no one backed down. "We will fight," Raymond said quietly. "Enough of living on our knees." Ethan nodded. His gaze was serious. "Then get ready. We have a few days, no more. We need to turn this town into a fortress." From then on, the streets of Red River changed. Men and women worked together. They built barricades, reinforced windows, made stashes of water and ammunition. Even teenagers carried boards and helped dig trenches. Cassie stood beside Ethan at the head of these preparations. She no longer looked like a defenseless girl who needed to be saved. Her eyes burned with determination. She knew how to instill confidence in others. "When we've dealt with this," she said one day, handing Ethan nails, "I'll build a new house." "You'll manage," he replied, hammering a board. "And I'll help." She smiled. "Then I'll have the most reliable builder." Ethan didn't answer, but something stirred in his chest. He hadn't heard words about the future in a long time. Their fears were confirmed. 3 days later, the lookouts saw clouds of dust on the horizon. Earl Clayton rode at the head of a whole troop. More than 30 armed men, mercenaries, former bandits, drunkards, ready to kill anyone for gold. Their faces were cruel and cold. "My God," one of the townsmen whispered, "they'll crush us." Ethan stepped forward. His voice was firm. "Today we decide everything. It's either them or us. There is no other way." The crowd was silent, but fear was giving way to anger. People gripped their weapons. Earl stopped his horse on the outskirts. His face was twisted in a malicious grin. "Well, Red River," he yelled, "ready to die for a stranger." Ethan walked to the middle of the street. "We are ready to live free, and you came here to die." Earl burst out laughing. "Kill them all," he commanded, and hell began. Bullets whistled, splintering wood from the houses. Women hid their children in basements. Men returned fire from behind the barricades. The first ranks of the attackers fell almost immediately, but there were too many of them left. Cassie screamed, firing her rifle. One of the mercenaries fell. Ethan covered her, shooting another. His movements were precise and confident, like a man who had lived a life of shootouts. But the enemies were pressing in. The barricades were cracking. Smoke obscured the streets. Amidst the chaos, a loud cry rang out. Grab the women. Burn the houses. Ethan understood. This wasn't just a skirmish. Earl wanted to wipe Red River off the face of the earth. Hold on, he shouted. For this town. The residents stood their ground. The blacksmith Raymond, with a heavy hammer, knocked two attackers off their feet at once. Old Joseph fired his old rifle until his hands trembled, so much he couldn't reload. Even the boy Timmy threw rocks from the roof, aiming for the bandits' heads. Cassie, next to Ethan, shot until her last bullet was gone. Her face was covered in soot, her hair was disheveled, but her eyes burned with fury. And suddenly the sound of a bugle, distant but clear. Everyone turned. From behind a hill, a troop of riders in long coats appeared. In their hands rifles, on their chests staffs. The marshals. The attacking crowd froze. Earl went pale. No. He exhaled. Ethan raised his revolver. It's over now. The marshals burst into the town, opening heavy fire. The mercenaries wavered. Their ranks began to crumble. Some threw down their weapons. Others tried to flee, but they were overtaken by gunfire. Earl screamed, urging his men on, but they didn't listen. Panic had seized the gang. Ethan moved forward through the smoke. His gaze was fixed on one man, on Earl. They met in the middle of the street, like two beasts. Everything around them thundered, but for them, only this moment existed. Earl raised his pistol. You took everything from me. Ethan replied in a cold voice. No, you lost everything yourself. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously. Earl swayed, blood staining his shirt. He fell to his knees, then crashed face down into the dust. The battle was over. The marshals finished off the survivors. The town breathed a sigh of relief. People were screaming with joy, crying, hugging each other. Cassie rushed to Ethan, pressing her whole body against him. We survived, she whispered. Yes, he replied, stroking her hair. Now you have a future. She looked up. We do, Ethan, are we? For the first time, he allowed himself to smile. The word we sounded as if it was erasing all his old wounds. The night in Red River was quiet. For the first time in many years, people slept peacefully. And on the main street, two people sat by a campfire, a man and a woman who had survived the storm. Ethan looked at the stars. Maybe it's time for me to stay. Cassie took his hand. You have nowhere else to go. This is your home. He squeezed her fingers. And he understood. For the first time in many years, he had truly come home. Red River greeted the dawn as a new town. Not in appearance, the streets were covered in ash. The houses were riddled with bullets. The barns smoked with charred walls. But something had changed in the people's souls. The fear was gone. In its place, there was strength. The marshals stayed in town for a few days, gathering prisoners and writing reports. They noted the courage of the residents, surprised that simple farmers and blacksmiths had managed to stand their ground against the Clayton gang. Your town is now free, said the senior marshal, an old man with a weary face. But freedom is hard work. Don't think that someone else will preserve it for you. The people nodded. They knew the words were true. Ethan Hayes barely rested during those days. With the men, he fixed roofs, hauled beams, and helped bury the dead. No one looked at him as a stranger anymore. Hayes, catch. The blacksmith Raymond threw him some nails. Over here, Jonathan. Help lift this. The teenagers called out. His name now sounded different, with respect and warmth. Cassie didn't sit idly by either. She cooked for the workers, bandaged the wounded, and took care of the children. The women whispered, she's with him. It must be fate. When Ethan returned to the hotel one day, tired and covered in dust, Cassie was waiting for him with a bowl of soup. You haven't had a bite to eat all day, she chided. He sat down, gratefully taking the spoon. You know, it's been a long time since I've eaten food made with care. She smiled softly. Get used to it. With each passing day, the town came back to life. Where Cassie's burned down house had stood, the men laid a new foundation. This will be your house, Raymond said. No, Cassie objected, looking at Ethan. Ours. He was flustered, lowering his eyes, but he didn't protest. One evening, they walked out of town to where the wind blew through the tall grass. The sun was setting, coloring the sky with gold and crimson. "When the marshals leave," Cassie said, "the town will start living again. But it will be different, without the Claytons." "And what about you?" Ethan asked. "What will your tomorrow be?" She looked directly into his eyes. "I don't want to be alone anymore. I want to build a house, raise children, but not with just anyone. With the man who stood up for us when the whole world turned its back." Ethan's heart ached. He had lived alone for so many years, haunted by memories of the past. But now, for the first time, he was being offered not pity, but life. He took her hand. "I don't know if I know how to be a husband," he confessed. "You'll learn," she said quietly. "We'll learn together." A week later, the marshals left the town. Red River saw them off with grateful gazes. But no one was afraid to be alone. The people knew. Now they were the masters of their own destiny. Ethan stood in the square next to Cassie. The crowd had dispersed to their homes, only the two of them remained. "So you're staying?" she asked. "Yes," he replied firmly. "It's time to stop being a fugitive." She smiled, and in her smile was all of the new Red River, a town that had survived hell and still lived. Time passed. The sound of the blacksmith's hammer could be heard on the streets again. Lights came on in the windows of the houses. New buildings rose from the ruins. People lived, worked, and laughed. And on the edge of town, a new house stood. There, on the porch, Ethan was mending a saddle, and next to him, in a rocking chair, Cassie was holding a baby. "Look, he looks like you," she said. Ethan smiled. "He'd be better off looking like you. You have a stronger heart." She laughed, rocking the baby. "Then let him take both your strength and my heart." They looked at each other, a long gaze that held everything: the pain of the past, the battles, the victories, and what remained after love and hope. Red River was no longer a town of fear. It had become a town of memory and new life, and in its heart lived a people who had passed through fire to finally find a home in each other. And when the evening wind rattled the shutters of their house, it seemed the town itself whispered, "Now you are free."